Good morning, everyone. We're continuing on with our life review in the finishing of the race. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. We are striving to live our lives in attunement with your will. Inspire us with clear understanding and lead us step by step, word by word, thought by thought, through the maze of delusion into the clear light of your guiding presence. We are your children. Guide us, protect us, and bring us home to thee. Om. Peace. Amen. Because I'm following Swami's writing here in this essay called The Final Exam, he sort of has organized his thoughts in a certain way, but because I've been going so word by word, I myself had gotten a little confused as to what the context was. So just to keep it clear with all of you, after Swami talked about the importance of the final exam itself, he has a checklist of things that we should do in order to, I guess, our study guide for the final exam. And the first item on the checklist, which is the only place only place we've gotten, is our life review. And he says, go over your life up to the present moment, concentrate on the happy times rather than the sad, since positive expectations will be more likely to attract you to a happy state after death. Still, do not avoid reflecting on the mistakes you have made. Try instead to view them possibly, but bear in mind the following points. And then that was number one on the checklist. And then subpoint 1A is feelings of guilt will hinder you from making further progress, acting as affirmations of failure. And then everything that we've been discussing since has been on how to be able to review your mistakes calmly and dispassionately without any feeling of guilt, which binds you to them, which causes you to perpetuate them. So we went through forgiveness and just everything, what you think of other people and hurt other people. And I'm not going to deal in detail, but he also mentions anybody you might have cheated, anybody that you've spoken critically about, anytime you've acted in such a way to cause yourself embarrassment. Oh, and I remember if you have denigrated, how does he put it, desecrated the image of your own higher self. So those are all the things that we went through. So all of a sudden, I came to point B. And I didn't know where point A was. I didn't understand what we were doing. And so now point B under life review. Point A was how to avoid guilt, which is to say how to work with your mistakes in such a way as to release them rather than to reinforce them in your mind. And then point B is, remember, every desire must be fulfilled. I want to finish this little paragraph here. My guru once made that statement to me. I asked him, every desire, even for something so trivial as an ice cream cone? His answer surprised me. It was quite definite, delivered without even a smile. Oh, yes, he insisted. Don't try, however, to search out every fleeting wish you may have had. That process might take forever. Rather, make a sweeping overview of your life and say simply, it is all yours, Lord. I want only thee now, nothing but thee. And he goes on to write a little bit more. So I'm going to, just give me a moment here. He says, go mentally over every desire in your heart and offer it to God. think of the higher spiritual counterpart part of the fulfillment promised by that desire. And then he refers to the ice cream cone, and he says, Anandamoy Ma, when she gave him a box of candy once, said to him, always taste sweetness. So now let me just sort of work with this for a few minutes, because I've had that in my mind, that little story that Swami tells about the ice cream cones, about how every desire must be fulfilled, even the desire for an ice cream cone when I was a child. And Swami tells that story. He, Master said every desire has to be fulfilled before God realization. Swami says, even an ice cream cone? I mean, his absolute expectation, which was that Master would say, oh, that's trivial, it doesn't matter. But that's why he commented that Master didn't even smile. He just said, oh, yes, like that. So let me share with you how I've thought about this. And of course, there's other, Master's idea, think of your life in a sweeping gesture and offer it all to God. Kriya Yoga, of course, plays an important part in this. Then Swami mentions a few specific desires, always eat sweetness, and the desire for a mate, which is something that really holds people, the desire for children. I mean, these are not easy things to just wave your hands and say, oh yeah, I give it all to God. But the whole thing seemed really weirdly unfair when I thought about it. Even the ice cream cone, it also seemed out of proportion and confusing to me. So I've been thinking about this for many years, and finally I've gotten a feeling, which I hope I can convey to you, which I think helps us to understand what's really happening here. Lately, a phrase had occurred to me which has proved useful when I think about delusion and life. And what we're trying to do as self-realizationists in order to fulfill the potential of our own spiritual self is that we want to have no distractions. We want to just be one-pointedly focused on God, and we want to have everything else look unattractive to us compared to our focusing on God. Now that is kind of a high bar to reach, but oftentimes the highest level can be understood from something we already know on the level of our everyday experience. So all of us can remember having had desires that we really wanted to fulfill, but that no longer attract us. They just don't seem important to us anymore. I mean, think of something small like wanting to be popular, as an example, maybe an adolescent desire to be popular, or to have a particular dress that you really wanted to have, or a position in the school that you may have wanted. And then you graduate from school and you see that trying to get the popular group to like you, wasn't really as important as you thought it was. I was remembering an incident that had completely gone out of my mind. When I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school, my first 2 years of high school were in El Paso, Texas, and then I came to California and finished high school in California. But when I was 15 in El Paso, Texas, for some bizarre reason, the quarterback of the football team decided that he wanted to go out with me. And it was a completely bizarre and odd thing. I remembered his name was Willie Sanchez. He was very handsome, and he was extremely popular in the school. And some girls who were part of that, popular cohort, which was never my cohort at all, came and told me that Willie wanted to go out with me. And, and it was all arranged that I would go to the post-football game party, and then I would meet Willie there. It was just this big, really big thing. And I remember also thinking at the same time that I was like flattered and surprised and, and quite willing to go along. The whole gestalt was so weird to me. I didn't even know this man. And so anyway, we went to the party and we stood around for a while, and, he was just as dull as a post. And all of the popular girls were just as dull as posts. It was just the most absurd thing. And then afterwards, of course, he expected me to make out with him in the car. Making out, that's what you did when we were teenagers then. And it was like, why would I want to do that? You're so uninteresting. It was just, the whole thing was so weird, but it was just one of those high school things that completely went out of my mind until just a few days ago. But how important all that stuff was at that time. I mean, even as I was eagerly going along with it, I was thinking, this is really crazy. These are not my people. I mean, that was basically it. These are not my people. There was nothing wrong with them. They had their own reality, but they were not my people. But there was this desire sort of to be in that world, go out with the quarterback and be with the cheerleaders, that kind of stuff. But now, of course, I mean, it's just even then, but there was a moment where it was attractive to me. So lately, the phrase has come to me, alternate theories of happiness, because we have a lot of alternate theories of happiness. They're alternatives to complete surrender to God. Because even though my ideal is complete surrender to God, I'm still trying out certain alternate theories of happiness. And it's just, do I have breakfast or do I meditate a little longer? I mean, that's an alternate theory of happiness. I would be happier sitting down to breakfast than I would be staying here and meditating. I would be happier lying in bed for another 45 minutes and just sort of looking at the pretty pictures in my room and letting my subconscious just roll along than I would be popping right out of bed saying, I'm awake and ready. It's just like these are all alternate theories of happiness. And alternate theories of happiness are, if only I had a child, a better job, a husband, or if only I had no husband. I mean, whichever reality it is that's bothering you. If I didn't have to take care of this family, if my mother-in-law, when I talk to my friends in India, if I had a nicer mother-in-law, it's an alternate theory of happiness to the life that God has given me, or to the aspirations of my heart, that I know where true happiness comes from, but I'm testing out these alternate theories of happiness. And we have to, and what I came to understand, have come to understand more deeply, is as long as we're holding one of those, it's going to occupy a certain amount of our energy. It's going to be a vritti in the spine. It's going to be a whirlpool of energy. And to that extent, the river of our consciousness will not be able to flow unimpeded to the spiritual eye, because we have to use some energy to support these alternate theories of happiness. Now, anybody can tell you over and over again that that's not really going to make you happy, me happy. And I might give very good lip service to it. I might even be able to articulate it better than you can articulate it to me, why it's not really going to fulfill me. But if I'm not completely persuaded on every part of me, I'm just going to keep holding on to it. And what profoundly and deeply enlightens us as to whether those theories of happiness are valid or not is to test them out and get the results of the experiment in life experience. And certainly, and Swamiji has an interesting, corollary which goes with all of this thinking. He says, we learn from having our desires thwarted. We definitely learn from being disappointed, not getting what we want. We can learn a lot from that. He said, but we learn more from getting our desires fulfilled, which is kind of a strange thought when I first heard it. But when I reflect clearly and more deeply on life, and have had more life experience to reflect on, and this is where it's very subtle, and it's very important to get this correct. It's not that having a family is a bad thing. It's not that building a beautiful home is a bad thing. It's not that having a very successful career and then having the money to have the freedom to do, to make your own plans without having to worry about that. None of those are bad things. They're just things. Everything in this world is completely neutral. Depends on the happy or sad frame of mind. Nothing is evil. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It just is what it is. And when you have that experience, then you can exactly know how much happiness it will bring you, which could be quite a lot. I mean, it could be a whole big basket full of happiness, but it still, if you're honest, won't be enough. Because, as St. Augustine said, my heart is restless and it it will never find its rest until it rests in God. I'm not quoting him accurately, but that's what he said. We will never be completely fulfilled until we fulfill our divine destiny and rest completely at peace in the presence of God. Then all the fulfillment we're longing for will come to us. So we drink the cup of human happiness, and we drink it, and we drink it, and we drink it. And then after it's been filled and we've consumed it, maybe after we've done that many lifetimes, we still have this part of us that it just wasn't enough. And that's the point when we're really able to renounce it. Because as long as a piece of us is only renouncing it because we're supposed to, or because, as Sri Ramakrishna said to the man who said, my family has left me, my job is over, my house burned down, I want to become a renunciate. And Ramakrishna said, you're not renouncing the world has renounced you. So when the world renounces us, we may have no choice except to find happiness with what's left. And it can also powerfully remind us that this world is unreliable, and we can learn a lot from it, and it can become an incentive for us to be more deeply dedicated to God. But if there's a piece of us anywhere in our psyche, anywhere in our spiritual, in our consciousness, any tiny piece in any of the chakras that still looks with longing upon that experience. We just look with longing upon that experience. There's a story, there's an incident that Master tells, or it's told somewhere, where he was with Dr. Lewis and they were going down some street, and there were very attractive houses, and as I recall, maybe it was dusk and the lights were going on in the houses, and Master could feel that Dr. Lewis was feeling a kind of nostalgic pull toward the family, the family life that was pictured there. And Master turned to Dr. Lewis and said, is it worth reincarnating for? And Dr. Lewis said, no, sir. But see, that's what it'll do. We look with longing. Maybe we never had a fulfilling relationship and we see a happy couple. We look with longing. Maybe we wanted to have children and we didn't have children, and we see darling little toddlers. We look with longing. It's an alternate theory of happiness that's still attracting us. Now, we can look with appreciation, but not with longing. It's longing and regret, you see, that pulls us back in. Those were the watchwords that Swami gave me a long time ago. Because if we look with longing, with nostalgia, with sentimental attachment, then we're not yet persuaded. We're still holding an alternate theory of happiness. So this is how I began to understand the ice cream cone and sort of what Swami is talking about there. If any part of me longs for something, that creates a dissonance. It moves us. Okay, God realization is the perfect oneness. All dualities have been resolved. Everything has come back to one. It's very hard for us to really comprehend this. Swamiji's remarkable statement, which I contemplate without having any capacity to experience. He said, when God realization comes and you realize that there is only one reality in the universe. I mean, just even that. There's only one reality. I'm sitting here identified with my body. I'm talking to you. You're identified with your individuality. You're listening to me. We have just all these multitudes, myriad of things. They're all separate. When God realization comes, all of it turns into light, and we realize there is only one reality. And then Swami said, for just a moment, there is an intense feeling of loneliness, that I am alone in the universe. And that's just like, I don't really quite know what to do with that. I mean, God knows I and others have experienced an intense feeling of being alone in the universe. But now Swami says, a moment later, after that loneliness comes, one is flooded with bliss, and then realizes that solitariness is a solitude of absolute bliss. These are just words to me, but they. Why I say that, I mean, this is not my experience. I've never been there. But they put into perspective what it is that we're trying to do. So if we're trying to offer ourselves completely to God, but we have this dissonance over here because we're still moving in duality. We're still moving over here, that there was this energy that wanted the ice cream cone that never got it, that still believes I would be happier if I had the ice cream cone. That has to be neutralized. And that's what he means when he says the desires have to be fulfilled. It's not that you have to eat an ice cream cone, I have to wear the dress, I have to date the quarterback. It's not like I have to do all those things, but I have to neutralize the longing. And of course, when we feel a certain lower level of restlessness, sometimes people will eat because they're sad, or they'll eat because they're lonely, or they'll get involved with someone they shouldn't get involved with just because they don't have anything better to do. I mean, it's like, it's not always that it's the thing itself that you're actually longing for. And this is what Swami writes about in this essay. The desire for a mate, for example, is to fill that cavernous longing for love that everyone has. So even though you might think what you want is a mate, what you actually want is you want to fulfill that cavernous longing for love. So the desire for love has to be fulfilled, but it doesn't have to be fulfilled. Now, this is me, the Gospel according to Asha. It doesn't have to be that thing that you thought was the fulfillment of the desire, but the energy behind it. That's why Master says, you don't have to think about each one. That process would take forever. Rather, make a sweeping overview of your life and say simply, it's all yours. I want only thee now, nothing but thee. And Swami says later, mentally go over every desire in your heart and offer it to God. Think of the higher spiritual counterpart of the fulfillment promised by that desire. If, for instance, you've had a desire for a car, don't merely tell yourself, I won't be needing a car anymore where I'm going. Say rather, now I'll be flying in heavenly freedom through vast skies of eternal bliss. And when you're thinking, he says, if your desire was for a mate, pray for the supreme bliss of eternal union with him. So what we're asking ourselves is, where does the actual fulfillment come from? Not what did I want, but why did I want it? What did I think it would bring me? So once again, it's cumbersome to have to go over every single thing. But as we move through this process of letting go, and now Swami's really writing this as if we had a terminal diagnosis, which of course we all have a terminal diagnosis, but if the terminal diagnosis were really sooner rather than a kind of mystical thing in the future, which it might be sooner, we never know. That's part of what this is all about. But imagining yourself in the last days of your life, which I often do, in the last days of my life, just on my deathbed, what lingers in my mind? What comes through? So if we do think of that car that we wanted, what would that car give me? What would the feeling of having that car be? What did I think that I would have when I had the car that I don't have when I don't have the car? And how else can I have that experience? And that's where he says, well, just what is it? It's the freedom of movement. It's the freedom to be able to go wherever I want to go. It's literally the pleasure of the feeling of the smooth ride and the beautiful color and the responsiveness of the machine or whatever. It might be cars are not my thing, so I'm having to really make all this up. But if a person does have a desire for a car, what is it really a desire for? You know, the desire for a mate. What is it that I'm really wanting in that? I want to be comforted. I want to be seen. I want to be understood. I want to be supported. And then we can at least use our imagination to feel Guru's presence, to feel Divine Mother's presence, and bring into our experience on a higher octave everything that was making us restless, so that then we can make that sweeping gesture that Master was saying is, it's all yours, I offer it all to you. And what we're doing is we're bringing ourselves out of duality, and we're bringing ourselves into the one. Instead of needing all of these small things that are pulling us right and left and right and left, we can operate just from the center of that flow of divine energy within us, taking us into a union with the Spirit. Now, how perfectly we can carry this out, it's really in God's hands. Our fate is really in God's hands, but we can certainly conscientiously carry out the exercise. And of course, the practice of Kriya Yoga is a tremendous support to this exercise, because it sends the river of divine longing through all of the chakras. And the more powerful that river of divine longing is, the more vrittis in the chakras are drawn into that river. The vrittis and the river going into up to the spiritual eye, into God union, has a certain magnetic force, and our attachment to these alternate theories of happiness has a certain magnetic force. And when we can make the river of longing even just the tiniest bit stronger than the magnetic force of the alternate theory of happiness, then it will just simply be dissolved into the river. And we won't even know it was dissolved. There will just be this ever increasing sense of freedom, this ever increasing power and dynamic energy to be directed in an upward moving way. And if we find ourselves, if we find ourselves having any of those vrittis, if we find ourselves in the last days or weeks of our life, we can do that process entirely just internally by by practicing the Kriya, as you know, and as best we can, depending on the condition of the body, if we're really dying. But we can practice that all the time, every time we do Kriya. I'm just dissolving these. I have no need to hold to any point of view, because everything that I really want, I will find if I give myself to the divine at the spiritual eye. This is the fire ceremony, you see. We burn up all of those desires by concentrating at the spiritual eye. And as they dissolve, as I was saying, far from this sense of deprivation and longing and sort of looking covetously at what we don't have, we begin to feel so fulfilled within that the thought no longer even arises. You see, that's what real freedom is. And the more we practice this long before the bodily exit, the more effortlessly liberating our final exit will be. And we'll pass the exam with flying colors. Isn't that something wonderful to look forward to? And it's better. It's better to study a little bit as you go along and still waiting till the night before and trying to get it all in. So if we just work on it every day with this, what am I really looking for? What do I think that will really bring me? And how can I find that fulfillment in God? Then grace descends, and everything that we're longing for will come to us. So God bless you, my friends.